today's video, which I promised to do some time ago, was I've always said my top 3 favorite Macross are Do You Remember Love, Macross 2, and Zetairai. I've been very, very adamant about this, that these are my top 3. And I said that I would do a mini marathon watching them and put them in order based on the ones that the order, like from third, second, and first in how I like them. So that's what I did today as I watched them. I watched the order of Do You Remember Love, Macross 2, and Zetairai last, because I've watched Zetairai already 6 times in 3 days, and what was it, 5 times in 2 days, so I put that off to the side. And this was I only did this because I thought, I thought it would be interesting to, now that I can watch all of them anytime I want, or any Macross, I could do a full Macross marathon if I wanted to, starting from 0 and going to Macross 2 in chronological order. Now that I have the second Delta movie, what I thought was, is this the order that I've stated I've liked them in, like through my Macross was it tier list video and stuff like that. I wanted to give all of them a fair chance and say, okay, I like this one for this reason, and this one for this reason, this one for this reason, and this is why I put them in this order in my top 3. So, and for the picture right now is Miho and Sally from Macross 7, and this is because they have nothing to do with it, so I don't, like show off what any of my answers are beforehand. So I just took this picture because I like Miho. So one of the things I I do like a lot of the minor characters in the older Macross, like the Mihos, the Shami from the first Macross. I really like Shami, and I like Amy from Macross 2. But they, like, when you get to like Frontier and stuff like that, they don't really involve the bridge crew all that much, so you don't get to really know who they are, or they're kind of put off to the side. So that's why you don't get to know them very well. So that's why the Frontier bridge crew and like the Delta bridge crew I don't care about at all. I will say though, I do like the fact that in Zetairai they have a bridge a bridge girl who looks exactly like Hayase Misa. That's just really funny fan service. So like Max being the captain of a ship and one of his operators looking like Hayase. I mean, come on, just come on, seriously. That's great little Easter egg for people. For fans of old Macross, right? So, anyway, I just want to put that out there so people don't think this is like my answer to anything. I'm just saying I like these 2 from Macross 7, so I put that there as like a placeholder picture. So, in 3rd place, Zetairai. Now, this is staying where I've consistently put it at, at 3rd. And now, what I'll say in its favor compared to, let's say, a Macross 2, it can't really do the same thing as Do You Remember Love in this sense, because that had actually Itano there, but Macross Delta does have the Itano Circus without Itano there, which is, Itano Circus I mentioned before is kind of like where Itano is very famous for having lots of missiles and things going on the screen at once, and lots of explosions and missiles and crazy stuff going on. You see this a lot in Macross Plus, especially when Guld is fighting with the Ghost one-on-one. That's Itano Circus. I'm sure people know what I'm talking about when I say that. So, but given that, the one thing that I will that holds this back, in my opinion, against the other two of this list, which is Macross 2 and Do You Remember Love. Well, one is the fact that the characters are all CG, and I'm not a fan of overuse of CG, and I like hand-drawn stuff. Of course, that's a preference. I know some people like CG, but everything looks copy-pasted, so it doesn't look good to me. And that's the thing. The battles, because I thought the battles in Zettai were much better than in Delta or in the TV series or the first movie. And that I'm not saying that as like a bad thing, because sometimes the CG for something like those scenes that they did in the fighting in this particular movie wouldn't be able to be done. Like, I can honestly say a lot of that wouldn't be able to be done hand-drawn. They would need to use CG. But, I mean, for the characters themselves, I think hand-drawn is better. Because it just looks like they copy-paste everything. So, yeah. That's one thing holding it back. Two, I think that unless you know the characters in Delta, you understand, you know, like, you have a lot of the backstory. This could be a difficult series for people, a difficult movie for people to watch, because they'll look at it as they do with most reviewers do, is they look at it in a vacuum. They don't look at it in the context of the lore. Now, for me, this has some of the best lore in Macross, period, I think, next to probably 0 or 7 when it comes to the lore, like the protoculture and all that stuff. I think that the lore and the deeper stuff in Zettai is great for somebody like me, because I've watched it 6 times in 3 days, and there's still things that I have questions about. So that's something good for somebody like me who's deep into it. But for someone who's kind of new to it and they just like look at all the pretty explosions, I don't know. But for personally, in my, like, I think that the CG holds it back, and I think that like the CG for the characters holds it back. And there's a couple things here I'm not a big fan of in it, but I'm not saying this to put this movie down, because remember, this is my 3rd favorite Macross thing, period. So I'm not, I really do like this, and I've said it so many times how much I like this. I'm just saying that in comparison to some other things, especially 2 and Do You Remember Love, I think that there's something lacking about it. And one of the things that I noticed, and this is another reason that I put it at 3, is when you watch Do You Remember Love or Macross 2 or maybe Macross 0, the songs are very timely placed, and everything else has, BGM for it, without like non-vocal BGM for it. Whereas this movie is almost constant singing, and you can tell it's to sell CDs, and this is what they did in Frontier as well. And it comes off as pandering to me. Now, I love the Yami Kyure songs, and I'm not, bashing them. I love Alive Inori Nota. That song makes me cry like crazy. Waru Kiri wa Akiramenai, I like it as a song, and it's well timed when they use it. But it's just like there's almost no actual BGM, and this is something I think holds it back, and this I think is part of the problem of modern Macross. This is a Kawamori problem, and this is like a CD company's, like the record label's problem. I think it's Flying Dog did both Frontier and Delta, if I recall correctly. So they're trying to sell as many CDs as they can, so they're trying to make as many songs as they can to make as much money as they can off of CD sales, and it just comes off as pandering in a lot of ways, and I think that kind of makes it suffer in some ways, because if there was a little more breathing room, you could take in the atmosphere a little bit better. I will say there's too much talking. Like, if you compare it to Do You Remember Love? And I'll get into this point because this is a point that I like about Do You Remember Love as well. There are certain points where it's like dead silent, and you just absorb the atmosphere of the scene. You don't really get that in this movie except at the very end, and I think that really holds it back, because I think it's like it's trying to tell you everything and not let you just absorb things. So I think that's one of the things that holds us back a little bit. Now, I'm not saying this is a bad movie. I've said it in my review video, in my spoiler video. I love this movie. It's amazing. Everybody should watch it, and they should understand it within the context and not just watch it in a vacuum. Watch it within context. But I absolutely think that it's a great movie. It's third best on my list of Macross, and I think everybody should watch it. If you're a Macross fan, you have to watch it. Just simply, you have to watch it. It's good. But keep in mind, there's so much lore in it. Watching it one time is not enough. And you need to compare it. You have to put it in context with everything else that's happened in the Macross universe to really understand what's, like, the deeper understanding of what's going on in this entire movie. That was specifically how it was made to be, to appeal to all generations of Macross fans, specifically. There's a reason why Max and Exeter are in the stinking movie, right? Let's get all the old fans to come and see Max, kicking everybody's butt again, right? So, and the fact that they talk about Mega Road 1 again, which is something they've not talked about in, like, openly in series, really. So, this is trying to appeal to all areas of all age group of Macross fans. So I think that's a really good point about it, but by doing that they had to put a lot of lore in there, and that can make it hard to understand sometimes. Okay, so on to number 2. I think people might be surprised with what I picked for number 2. Do You Remember Love? This is a really hard decision because and I thought about it as I was watching it, and then I was watching Macross, I was watching Zeta Raiba. Do You Remember Love is amazing. I think it is probably the best movie ever made. Like, not even just anime. I think just as a movie, it's probably the best movie ever made. It has everything. It has suspense. It has sad stuff, with people dying. It has love scenes. It has really powerful emotional scenes. And some of the best scenes in this movie are the ones where they let the atmosphere, control the narrative instead of telling you things. I'll give you a couple of the 3 big examples that I always talk about. Well, there's 2 main examples I talk about, and there's one more I think that I should add to it because I think it belongs in there. One is after Max and Miria get done, like beating up on each other inside Miria's flagship, and Max is wounded, and he walks over to Miria, and her helmet comes off, and he sees how beautiful she is, and he just says "Utsukushi," and he stares at her, and most of that is quiet. It's only 2 words in that entire scene. Max says "Utsukushi," and then Miria just repeats what he says. There's very little talking. It's all, Max is fallen in love with her. Like, the minute he sees her, he's in love with her, kind of thing. So, I think that it lets you absorb, the atmosphere. The second one is when Minmay goes to see Hikaru in his apartment after they've been rescued and after Mime goes back under the Macross. And then Hayase comes in, talks about the lyric plate that she found in the city, and that she had translated the lyrics. And then Mime runs outside, and then Hayase's like, "Well, you're able to see her again. Just go and get her." And then Hikaru yells back at Hayase and stuff like that. And then the main point of this scene is right before he says who he's gonna choose, which is Hayase. We all know. Everybody knows if this is so old. It doesn't matter if there's a spoiler trick. It's just such an old movie. He says the one I want to be with is, and then he has this long pause, and then he says you. I'm just doing like rough translation. Don't jump on me. The point is that there's this long pause before he picks, where he specifically says that he wants to be with Hayase. And leaving that breathing room creates suspense and tension within the scene. And it makes the scene much more powerful when Hayase, is so excited about, Hikaru picking her, right? Over Mime. It's just such a perfect scene. You can't get any more romantic than that. In almost all of Macross, I don't think there's a more romantic scene in all of Macross. Although you could argue Zetaireibu at the end, because that's pretty romantic too. Just kind of, it's just really sad. So, and then the final scene is after Bordeaux's killed and Mimi turns around and, is just staring at Hayase. They don't exchange a single word throughout that entire scene. And then the first person to open her mouth is Claudia about what the origin of the song was. And you can see how Hayase and Mime kind of are accepting of each other, and Hayase's, really thankful to Mime for singing a song and all this other stuff and whatever, right? But it's such a long, silent break, and they're just staring at each other. That scene, this is something that Zetaireibu doesn't have at all. It doesn't have one of these, dead silent scenes. And this is an indictment of most media today, is that they have to tell you everything and not let you absorb it within the moment, right? And this is one of those scenes that is probably one of the best scenes in Macross, because it doesn't require a word to be spoken for you to understand how good of a scene it is. Now, this, as for the rest of the movie, it's got the Itano circus, because Itano was involved, but it's done all hand-drawn, so you get, the real Itano circus. And you get a chance, outside of maybe Kakizaki gets a little more screen time than, the operator girls like Shami, Kim, and Vanessa, but, and that makes me kind of sad, because the one scene with Shami about them talking about, jumping from boyfriend to boyfriend or something right after Mime and Hikaru are caught, kissing. That scene with Shami is so cute. She's just so innocent. It's just so cute. That's why I like Shami. But they couldn't really put any more into it, I think, because of where the rest of the story had to go. But I think it, as a whole, it's an incredible movie. Everyone should be forced to watch this movie, because it's just so powerful. It's got, all these important, powerful scenes and everything. I think just as a movie, this one by itself as a movie is incredible. The later Macross stuff requires background. Maybe Plus doesn't as much, but like Frontier and Delta require backstory. So, you know, that makes it kind of hard to watch them without being a fan of Macross, basically. Now, since I've only got 3 choices here, and, you know, I've already talked about the other 2, you're going to know my final choice for number 1 is Macross 2. And I will die on this hill. It has scenes where there's quiet, like, you know, they're like, you just feel the scene. You have the characters. You have the deeper stuff with like news stations thinking that they should actually, you know, report on things honestly, which is something we don't have now, sadly, but, you know, it makes you think about that stuff now because of the way that they wrote it here. It talks about all, like, the deeper propaganda, the control of information, and you can't do that without a lead character who's a reporter. And I will continue to say this. People who complain about Hibiki being a reporter and not a pilot do not understand Macross 2 whatsoever, and you should not listen to their opinions at all about it. Anyone who criticizes Hibiki on that point is not a reliable source. 2, one thing I noticed is that a lot of the English-speaking reviewers of Macross, they like to bash this because they say, oh, well, there was only a few people who from the original team that were actually working on this. Well, you know what? Guess what? The only people in Macross Delta Zettai Raibu who've been around since way back when are like Miyatake, and I didn't even think Miyatake was in Zettai Raibu. He had anything to do with Zettai Raibu. I can't remember. I think he might have done something, like a little bit of the Valkyrie stuff, but you have Kawamori and you have Sasaki Ichiro, the music director. Guess where Sasaki got his start? Macross 2. It was the first Macross he participated in, and he's been in every Macross since as the music director. Okay, so I was a director producer, one of the two. So he started with Macross 2 and he's been there ever since. Tomita, who wrote Macross 2, was on Do You Remember Love? And he stopped being involved, I think, with Zero. I think he did Zero, or he had something to do with Zero. But the last one I remember off the top of my head that he was directly involved in was Dynamite 7. So he's been gone for quite a while. And Mikimoto hasn't really, like, his animated characters in Macross haven't been used since 2. And he only did the base character designs for 7 and only for Roy Folker in 0. So he did the Macross Reverse comic book series, but other than that, Mikimoto hasn't really been involved with Macross that much in the past quite a while. He had nothing to do with Frontier and he had nothing to do with Delta, which pisses me off when it comes to Max's character design. It should have been Mikimoto who did the design for him. The Macross 2 gives you everything that Do You Remember Love gives you, but I like Ishtar more than Minmei. Ishtar is very innocent, she's very honest, and she's not, like, she's honestly curious, and when she's happy about something, she's very happy about it, and it shows in her expressions. Like, Minmei is, you know, because she's got that acting going on, like in the beginning with that scene with Hikaru when they're, you know, floating, and right before she kisses him. You know, Minmei isn't as likable as Ishtar, I think, and I think, you know, Sylvie is a very good, like, lead heroine pilot character. Like, you have to think that most of the characters in Macross 2 are female. Like, outside of the big head honchos that, you know, in the government, in the military, and Hibiki and Nyx and Mash. Well, Mash is, Mash. Mash is special, and even Ishtar calls him a woman. So, which is funny. And even Hibiki like, oh, Mash. But like the main like squadron fairy team is all female. I mean, you got Sylvie, Amy, Saudi, and Nastasha. I think Nastasha should have had a little more time. She didn't get a lot of screen time, I thought, which I felt kind of bad. Amy got more than her, but for me, it's good because I like Amy. But I think maybe that was a little bit. I think just the overall aesthetic of Macross 2 is like, I enjoy it more, and I'm far more emotional with it than I am with Do You Remember Love. As much as I'm a Max and Miria fan, Max and Miria, just Max Miria forever. Just give me Genus, but I think as a whole, and I'm not picking out like specific characters because I think Max and Miria got the short end of the stick in both the TV series and the movie. I think they should have had more screen time. In both of them, especially post-war in the TV series. I think they deserved a lot more screen time than they got, which really pisses me off. I think that overall, Macross 2 is my favorite, with Do You Remember Love like really close, but just behind it, and then Zetaireibu as third place. So, to go over my list one more time, first is Macross 2, number 2 is Do You Remember Love, and number 3 is Zetaireibu. So, I hope people get something out of this video, just because I did it out of my own curiosity, basically. I don't expect a lot of people to really care what I think, but, that's just my standpoint on these 3 movies, or on these 3 series, because I think all of them are great, and anybody who tells you Macross 2 sucks can go piss off. And for my next video, I plan on doing the canonicity of Macross. So, I'm thinking of doing a full, from Macross 0 to Macross 2, and try to show not just the connections between, one series and 2, but to show like the connections to, like, let's say with 0, the connections to Frontier would be Cheryl Gnome being the blood related granddaughter to Malonome from 0, or like how Machina from Delta is the great granddaughter of Nakajima Raizo, who is in Macross 0. And then she also mentions that her father, in the TV series, she mentions her father worked on the VF1s, and in the first Delta movie, she says her grandfather worked on the VF0s. So that's where you get all this background. Or like how Reina is from Zola, which is in Macross Anime 7. I want to try to connect the dots for a lot of people. Or also, what is the canon of Macross? Because there's a lot of misunderstanding. Like, even through a comment in my spoiler review for Zetaireibu, somebody had mentioned the TV series episode 25 from Frontier, where Ranka heals Cheryl of her, sickness from, being infected with the Bajra disease or whatever. But that's entirely retcon because of the movies. So, I kind of want to go over what is the canon of Macross in terms of the series, so people know what what they should watch to understand the entire timeline. So I'm thinking about doing that as well, because I don't think there's nobody who's done that in English. So And most of the Japanese videos are done really short, like 5 minutes, and they break it into multiple videos or something. But I like to do everything just at once because it's just easier that way. But I want to do that as well because, you know, I want people to know what the canon of Macross is, so that they know like how to interpret everything, because especially with like Frontier and Delta specifically, the TV series get completely retconned by the movies, especially Delta. And Delta, the second movie, retcons so much of the TV series, just like lays waste to it. So, so that's why I think that I need to explain what the canon is and how the canon of Macross works, so that you can see what the connections are, so that you understand what you should watch and what you shouldn't watch, and like what takes place in what point and all this other stuff, right? So, that's probably gonna be my next video. It's gonna be a little bit of a long one, but I wanted to get this one out. I just had something fun I thought I would do, just like putting my top 3 in order and telling why I think they belong in the top 3. So I hope people enjoy this video. If you don't, you don't, whatever. Just go ahead and watch it, and you can give me your opinions on how you would rank these 3 in your personal way. I don't, and this is not to say, you know, like, oh, I hate Macross too, so I wouldn't even put it in the top 3. If you're gonna talk about this, I want you to keep it within the list that I've done. So talk about Zeta Raiva versus Do You Remember Love versus Macross 2, and how you would order them and why you would put them in that order. Because I just want to hear what other people think about it. But I want to make it clear, again, that I do not hate Zeta Raiva at all, okay? I love this movie. I absolutely love the movie. I just think it's weaker than the other 2 ahead of it. That's all. In a general sense. So, but Yami Kyurei, I can't argue against Yami Kyurei. Sorry, Yami Kyurei is amazing. I seriously cannot argue against Yami Kyurei. I like, as much as I like Ishtar, I can't argue against Yami Kyurei. Yami Kyurei is just amazing. And they only have 3 songs, and you know, the Japanese public were like, oh, we want more Yami Kyurei songs, we want more Yami Kyurei songs. It's like they only had the 3 songs because they adapted them and they absorbed them and they learned them from, you know, like, and then they disappeared because there's no more siren system. And you can't have more Yami Kyurei. Sorry. I mean, seriously. As much as I would like more Yami Kyurei, we're getting 3 songs, that's it. Sorry. But anyway, that'll be all for this video, and I'm gonna do the canon of the canon of everything sometime soon, so keep an eye out for that.